Dan Goodwill joins John and I this week on the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast. And as he says, he's been in this crazy business for more than 40 years. Let's get right to the interview.
Welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast.
Well, good morning, Dan. Glad you could join us, Chris and I. So, for our folks that are listening here today, let's give a little background on Dan Goodwill and the operation that he runs.
Sure. My pleasure. Hey, great to be with you fellows this morning and really looking forward to it. So I've been in this crazy business now for 40 years, believe it or not. Started in the trucking business, spent my first 22 years in the trucking business. I worked my way up with the old Overland Express to become director of sales and VP sales, and worked with the old TNT organization, was general manager of TNT Railfast. Moved to the Clark organization, spent 9 years with them, and was president of Clark Logistics, which was their freight broker, intermodal marketing business. And then got a call from a headhunter in Chicago, Illinois, and the next thing I was president of Yellow Freight in Canada. And so I did that for a few years into the early 2000s, and then decided time to set up my own consulting company, which I did, Dan Goodwill Associates. And we kind of wear two hats. We work with shippers and help them with their freight programs, help them become more efficient and save some money on freight.
Yep.
And we help trucking companies and logistics companies with business development and helping them improve profitability. So that's what's kept me busy, fellows, for the last 40 years. And it's quite a ride. I've had a lot of fun.
No doubt. Multiple hat wearer here over the years.
Yeah.
Well, back in my early days, I too was at a TNT division. TNT, of course, had multiple divisions right across the world. Well, right across the world, but here in Canada, they had a lot of divisions. And I was there. I didn't work. I worked for a small little outfit of TNT at the time, but and then that's who I was safety. I was in the TNT safety department for TNT Canada. That's where I cut my teeth on safety back in the old days.
Well, I'm sure we crossed paths. We just probably don't remember, but I'm sure we crossed paths in the 80s somewhere.
Yeah, well, and that's what it was. Claude Chalk. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, vaguely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was my boss, and Don Newsom.
Oh, Don Newsom, I knew very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Don was my VP when I was in safety.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got similar. What do you call that? Not heritage, but yeah, heritage might be a good word.
Yep.
Hey, Dan, what intrigues me was what you had said about you work with shippers. So if I'm a shipper, why would I reach out to Dan Goodwill and Associates?
Great question. And I'll give you the answer right here, which is, we, over the years, we got a lot of calls, and most often they are from, let's say, VP Finance or President or CEO. And it's a very similar conversation. They'll say to me, hey, Dan, we're spending $18 million a year on freight. And we have a good guy. We got Joe over there in the corner, has been running the freight transportation department for 25 years. I think he's doing a pretty good job, but I'm not sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. Not sure that we couldn't be a little bit more efficient in managing freight. And the conversation usually goes along the lines of, hey, that's exactly the kind of work we do. And, myself and some of my colleagues will be happy to come in and see what you're up to and see what you do and try to help you do it a little bit better. And so we've had many projects like that. A lot of fun.
Well, how
Cool.
So they're looking to streamline an $18 million shipper. How do you go about that? What are some of the things? Sorry, here's my thought process. If I'm a trucking company, I'm interested in what you're telling that shipper, because of course I've got to work for the shipper, and I never make enough money. So here Dan's going in there telling them how to save money. is what I heard, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think that, I mean, the first thing, we understand is that when we talk to the VP Finance, he'll say, Dan, let's say our $18 million or $30 million we're spending on freight is, say, somewhere between 2 and 10% of our revenue. So it's a big amount of money. And, over the years, our clients have spent typically between, say, $5 and $100 million on freight. And so what I'll say to the VP of Finance typically is, I think the first thing you need to understand is that freight transportation, I know you're spending, say, 3%, and your 3% equals 18 million bucks, and it's a lot of money. But understand one thing, freight transportation is a variable expense. It's not a fixed cost. And so there are a variety of things you can do to help you save money on freight. And I should, just so for the audience listening in, just be very clear about it. Some people may be looking at me and say, well, Dan's probably the kind of guy that comes in and tries to beat up on all the carriers.
Yeah.
And, okay, sometimes we'll have a conversation, definitely have a conversation about rates, of course. I mean, that's part of it. But there's so much more to managing freight than just beating up a carrier on rates. I just want everybody to understand that when we go in, there's all kinds of things we look at to try to help these folks save money. And we can often save them 5-10% on their expenses. Sometimes in one case, we couldn't believe it, but at the end of the time, and the exercise, we walked away, we'd save them 40% on their freight costs.
Wow. Geez, that's a lot.
That's the all-time record, I have to say. But that was, and just to give you guys an idea of the kind of things we look at. So we try to look at the whole gamut. We look at things like, the freight itself. How is the freight packaged? Is it packaged safely? Is there too much air in the package? Can it be loaded properly? Can it be double stacked? Are you cubing out the trailer? Are you efficient in how you're packaging and loading your freight? We'll look at their data. We'll do a deep dive into their data. We'll look at how they're moving their freight. We're looking at, we see shippers, for example, that running LTL freight to the same place every day. And we say, why are you doing that? You can consolidate and your freight will get to Edmonton or Calgary or Winnipeg on the same day. You don't have to do that. You can consolidate. Why are you moving everything over the road? With certain days of the week, you could use intermodal. Why are you doing that? We'll see things that'll jump out at accessorial charges that are completely out of whack, things of that sort. So there's that whole data piece where we try to identify what can they do smarter. Then there's the organization. And, as I said, a lot of times people say to me, hey, Dan, Joe or Bob or Bill over in the corner, he's been doing a great job for a million years. What we try to find out is, has he been doing the same thing for 25 years? Does Joe or Bob have the knowledge? Does he have the experience? Is he doing the right things? And so we look at that, and then we look at all of the processes that the company has. How are they procuring freight? How do they select carriers? What's their dispatching process? How are they contacting the carrier? How are they managing their freight? How are they tracking their freight? Are they looking at what they're spending? Are they looking at carriers that are double charging or overcharging or things of that sort? Are they looking at the performance of the companies that are working for them? And of course, their overall freight expenses. When's the last time you looked at the market and what the market will bear for your freight? Are you doing that? So those are the kind of things we have that kind of discussion, and we try to help shippers improve in each of these areas. And we've never been to a shipper where we haven't found something. And in some cases we found a lot. There's opportunities to save money on freight.
And none of what I heard you say was you weren't beating down the trucking company. You were just making the shipper more efficient.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And I think let's just talk about this whole thing about beating down the carrier. So, to be totally transparent, yes, we've done a number of freight RFP or freight bid exercises. And I know for a lot of carriers, that's a dirty word. And, I'm kind of the villain when I get involved with something like that. But I think it's important for carriers to understand when we do these exercises, these freight bid type exercises, we have multiple meetings with the shipper and we try to get into the shipper's head and we try to understand who are your core carriers? Who are those key carriers that are most important to you? We try to understand your relationship with some of your carriers. Is it transactional? Is it just you got a load to move? And so you go on the internet or you just post a load and give it to anybody? Or are these regular moves? You're 2 loads a week to Moncton, or you're 3 loads a week to Winnipeg, or whatever it is. So who are the real key guys? Who are the ones that are doing a good job for you? And who are the guys that mean most to you? So when we go through this exercise and we come to the end of the exercise, you will have rates, and oftentimes we'll have rates that will be, let's say, better than what the core carriers are paying. And so the shipper's got a dilemma. Like you can say, well, carrier A's rates are 5% better than carrier B, which is the accompanying carrier. What should I do? What do I do? I like carrier B, but I can save 5%. And so I think it's important for, your carriers that are listening to understand that there are shippers out there that are very enlightened. Yes, there are shippers that all they care about is the lowest buck. And I'd be a liar to say that's not the case. Of course, that's the case. There are guys that are bottom feeders. And the trouble is when you feed off the bottom, you get something off the bottom. The old adage, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So if you select a low quality carrier that doesn't have the assets, that doesn't have the technology, then you're getting what you're paying for. You're getting a lower price, but that you're not going to get the service. But what I've seen with my enlightened shippers that kind of get it, which is they say, Dan, I think you should go back to this carrier and say there's a bit of a rate differential, and maybe they could adjust their rates a little bit. And then in some cases, carrier and shippers will say to me, Dan, that carrier does a hell of a job for me. On Friday night when I need those extra trailers, I get them. When I need a pickup on a Saturday, he does that for me. My people love working with their people. He thinks their people are great. And so, Dan, at the end of the day, yeah, I'm prepared to pay them more. So let's stick with carrier B. They're a good company. I know I got to pay a few bucks extra, but I want to stay with them. I should mention too, just so your carriers know, I do freight bid work for both sides of the fence. So sometimes there are carriers that'll come to me and say, Dan, I got this freight bid. It's so complicated. Can you and your guys help me answer? Yeah. And so we've done that too.
Sure.
Of course, we never work on both sides on the same project. That would be a
slight conflict of interest there, wouldn't it?
Come on. But I think just so you understand, that's kind of how things work. And we come to the end of the exercise and we'll say to the shipper, and also we'll say that, look, you've got good carriers, but you really should surround yourselves with some backup carriers. And some shippers have trouble with that. Well, Dan, like if I use a backup carrier, then I'm going to be spending more money. Like that guy's rate is a little bit higher than my incumbent. Yes, that's very true. But what happens, especially what we've seen in the last few years, where we've had driver shortages, capacity shortages, carriers having trouble covering all their loads. Smart shippers say to themselves, I better have some backup carriers. Yeah. Good ones.
Well,
and count on.
And right now, we might be going into a recession. And if we do, will that cause any bankruptcies in the future? So again, I think that's a smart advice on your part to say, hey, you need a backup because you never know what happens.
Well, it's interesting what Dan's talking about because it goes right into in line with what I used to do when I had my trucking company. Now, we specialized in over-dimensional open deck freight, step decks, double drops, not. But one of the things that was really key to me was the relationship with that customer, that shipper per se, or even it might even be a receiver, right? They're buying product from somebody and they want you to haul it down to their location for them. But one of the things was when we talked about pricing, yeah, we were a little bit more, and I didn't want to be transactional. I wanted that relationship with them. So it hits on what you're talking about is building that relationship to the point where, each side is dependent upon one another for good. No, not good, for great service, right? And the thing
Absolutely.
that needs to be taken into account, and a lot of people on the trucking side don't see this because they think it's covered in another fashion is damage. When you have damage to the cargo, that costs the customer, the shipper, because now, well, I've got to replenish that damage. Yeah, it might be covered by insurance or the carrier's going to pay it out of their pocket, but it creates an inconvenience. And now it also creates strain with the shipper and their customer because somebody's now starting to question, every third shipment, we have this problem. Why are you continuing to use this carrier if they're not doing the right job? So, it may not cost them or save them or cost them anything in their shipping prices, but it is affecting their reputation and their relationship with their customer.
Absolutely right. There's no doubt about it that smart shipper realizes that the carrier is really customer facing. It's the direct interface with their suppliers and their customers. And so how that carrier comes across, the way the driver conducts himself, is he professional? Is he polite? How he interacts, the dispatcher, the relationship, just like you said, John, those are key pieces of a good relationship. And I know this whole relationship thing has been kind of tested the last few years and it's tested really, I'm glad you mentioned that word because it's tested all the time. So like, for example, you do one of these RFP exercises and you award the freight. Then a couple of months later, the carrier walks in, the carrier salespeople are always calling on shippers and the carrier salesman walks in and says, can I just give you a rate quote? I'd really like to do some work for you. So they give shipper a rate quote and it's 5% less or 10% less, whatever it is than what he's paying today. So the shipper's awarded the freight, got a nice relationship with the carrier. What does he do? He's got a rate quote. He can save some money, look like a hero to his boss. And that's where on the shipper side, that's where this relationship, you test the relationship. And in fairness too, you see it on the carrier side where, I'm working for a carrier and they land an account. So they committed to move 3 loads a week to Calgary for this particular shipper. But they just land a new account that's paying 30 cents a mile more to Calgary or $50 a load or $80 a load more to Calgary. So you say to yourself, gosh, I've only got this number of pieces of equipment. If I may move this piece of equipment for this shipper, I could make more money for the shipper down the road than for the shipper that awarded me this business. Who, by the way, I've been doing business with for 5 or 10 years. So that's where a relationship gets tested on both sides. And you see what kind of relationship you really have. That if you built a relationship based on honesty and trust and transparency, fairness, and you respect each other, if the shipper really respects the carrier, he might have a conversation, say, I think your rates are a little out of line, but you run a great company. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to injure you guys in any way. But too many times you see, a knee-jerk reaction on both sides. Right. When times were good a couple of years ago, carriers got greedy.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And,
How are you seeing in that relationship between the carrier and the shipper.
Yeah.
How are you seeing the conversation of safety management coming in? And in particular, I want to focus on a particular area, and that's with safety carrier profiles or carrier safety profiles. So your CVOR, your SMS profiles and whatnot. Those are the government documents that kind of give me a quick report card of how you're doing. Because a perfect example of that would be a shipper starts to notice that this one carrier is starting to become late a little more frequently, right? They're not making their deliveries on time. And
Yep.
when you focus back to find out why, it's like, oh, yeah, well, we're getting pulled into the scales. They're doing full inspections. It's cutting me back by an hour.
Yeah.
Our timelines are tight. And now all of a sudden this is happening. Or you get the odd one that, oh, we've got to reschedule the whole appointment because now my truck's out of service because of a brake defect or whatever it be. How many shippers are you seeing that are starting to focus on looking at those safety carrier profile documents to help them determine that relationship with that motor carrier?
Okay, that's a great question. So there's a couple of sides to that. First of all, I should mention, like, we deal with a very select group of shippers. We only do work, we're a small company. We only work with a select group of shippers every year.
Sure.
But one thing we do, when we get asked to do, let's say, an RFP exercise, in every one of these, we ask for the CVOR of every carrier, okay, that's putting in a bid. And we ask them for, some detailed information about their technology, their IT capabilities, their service, on-time service performance. We ask for all of that information. And, there's a lot that can get hidden underneath a CVOR number, as you guys know better than I do.
Yeah.
But you ask for that up front, and then and what also I encourage shippers to do is, a shipper will say, Dan, we haven't been happy with the carrier that's doing Quebec. We're not happy. Like, we have a lot of freight that moves to eastern, northern Quebec, and we have to make a change. And we've had some issues there. Like, they may say we've had some safety issues, we had some damage issues. And I'll say to them, look, you know what? Before you award the freight to anybody, you've got a few carriers or you don't know them. And I may know them, I may not know them. I say, let's do this. Let's give them a trial. Let's try them for several months and see how they do. And I say, with this trial, you have your scorecard, you do your tracking, your on-time service tracking and so on. Track, see how they do. Watch your claims, watch your on-time service performance. Also, look at things like when you have a load to be picked up, do they respond? Do they come or do they turn you down? Are you going to be able to rely on them to pick up your freight? So I think that's, you got to do kind of a holistic job on this, and this whole safety thing, just to look at a CVOR number in and of itself. You fellows would know it may be a bit misleading. I mean, you get a satisfactory or whatever it is that may not tell the whole story.
Exactly. Yep. You got to look
You
deep.
can't tell the whole story across Canada.
Yeah.
Right. So, all I say to the shippers is, you've had problems, do your homework. Don't rush into, I know you want to award the freight and get on with it. And you want to get out of this RFP exercise and get on with managing your freight. I get that, but you also owe it to your company to do a thorough job, to do the job right and make sure that the carriers that are moving the freight for you are safe carriers, on-time carriers that are going to do a good job. That's kind of how I see it.
Well, and that may not always be the lowest price carrier. It costs money to have a good CVOR score or a SMS score. There's a lot of costs involved in trucking, as we all know. So and the good shippers, I got to believe, recognize that it does cost money. And as you said earlier, I don't think it's always, the good shippers recognize that the lowest price isn't always the best price.
Oh, no doubt about it. When I work with shippers, I mean, I say to them, look, these are the things we got to look at. We've got to look at their fleet. We got to look at their capacity. We got to look, especially now, like things have really changed the last few years. So it's hard to get drivers. It's hard to get good drivers. It's hard to get drivers to stay with you. There's, turnover and so on. So can you count on this fleet? Have they got the right equipment? What's their driver turnover ratio? What's their on-time service look like? Employee responsiveness, claims, billing, which is, oftentimes a problem. You wouldn't believe it, but it oftentimes can be a problem. Safety, technology, and technology is becoming more and more important. And I think this is going to be a key factor in the years ahead, is that some of the little guys are going to have a tough time keeping up with the big guys in terms of, modern technology. And, we're moving into a new era now. There's all kinds of new stuff going on, digital freight matching and all this sexy stuff. And so, are the smaller guys going to be able to keep up? Communication, all of these things. And I also, with my customers, always say, look, you have to have a scorecard. You have to have quarterly meetings. You have to track. You can only manage what you measure. If you're not measuring a character and all of these attributes, you make a mistake. And I say to the carriers I work with too, is you're proud of your company. You're proud of the service you give and the way you operate. You should be initiating these kind of meetings with your shippers. You should. Okay. Don't wait for them. Take the initiative. You go in and say, we want to talk to you. We want to show you what we've done for you in the last quarter. Can you give us a few minutes to do that? And I also encourage carriers to look, don't just leave the relationship at the lowest level. Don't just leave it at dispatcher to dispatcher. Get your operations manager to go in and have a rapport with the shipper. When's the last time your VP, VP of operations, went to that shipper and visited the shipper? When's the last time the president, if it's a big customer, has your president been in to that shipper? Does he know the president of that shipper? He should. He really should. He should have a rapport and talk to him periodically and pick up the phone and say, I work for, I'm president of ABC Truck Lines. Is my company doing everything we can to help you out? What can we do?
I've known one motor carrier that actually has their safety director involved in those meetings with their clients.
100%.
To be able to promote how they are being a safe operation, safe people to protect the motoring public and your cargo, to make sure it's safe, because we know your families are on the road with our drivers. So they promoted that. So I agree with it. It's all about that relationship.
It's all about it. And that way, it's not just a numbers game. I mean, some of these carriers over the years said to me, oh, Dan, geez, all these shippers want to do is reduce my rate and get me out of here. And no, it's not that way. If you built a solid relationship, if you're doing a good job, the good shippers I worked with want to have good carriers working for them. There's no percentage in having bad carriers that don't deliver. The guy's driving through Arkansas and he stops for a day or two to visit his girlfriend on route to a delivery. That doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah. Well, one little story I'd like to share from back in my day. I worked with a shipper, and we built a very tight relationship. And one of the things was we were hauling these. They were a platform piece. They were 10 feet wide, and so we were hauling them over dimensional, right? And we had to haul them from here to wherever. And we always had to meet a crane at the other end. And one of the problems that we had was we had to travel. We couldn't travel at night. So we had to always coordinate things and move things out. And there were times where, it was tight on the shipping time and we had to get it out there as quick as possible while we moved the crane to noon rather than first thing in the morning. One of the things that we sat down with them and we said, look, we think there's a better way to ship these pieces you guys are manufacturing. And we were running a lot of step decks. And we said, if we stood them up on an A-frame, we can handle 10 feet high. We could stand them up. We could reduce your costs, get rid of the permits that we needed, and we could be sitting on their doorstep first thing in the morning for the crane. That would help us get our reload picked up and on our way back for the next day. So we would save time, you would save money. And it was interesting because that conversation got us so much more work from that customer because we dedicated to work with them on helping them save money as well.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a fantastic point. And I see the same thing to my clients is that, look, and my carrier clients say, look, hey, if you see something, just like you mentioned, John, if you see something when you're out on the dock or whatever, um, that could save the shipper money. I know you say, like, why are you trying to save a shipper money? You're trying to get the rates up. Yeah. Well, no, that's it. If you can save the shipper money so that it's a win-win, the shipper's going to love you. You know that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, all we hear from carriers is, I want a rate increase. Rates are going up 4.5% this year, 6.5 or whatever it is. But if you can say to the shipper, look, if I can drop some trailers in your yard, if I can do this, if you can give me a better appointment delivery time or pickup time, like you see, when you do these projects, you see some crazy things. I mean, for example, I was working with a manufacturer in the States a few years ago, and they had a warehouse about 200-300 miles away. And so they do deliveries to this warehouse. They own the warehouse. They own their manufacturing plant. They own the warehouse. So I'm looking at their data. I'm seeing all these accessorial charges, all this waiting time at their warehouse. I'm saying, isn't this your warehouse? Yes. Yeah. Why are you paying waiting time to deliver to your warehouse? Why are you doing it? And the answer was that the guy that was running the warehouse just wasn't doing a good job in this whole appointment delivery thing. Those were chaotic. So carriers were coming into a company-owned warehouse and they were paying through the nose for excess waiting time. So it's just a case of, if you're working with a shipper and you see things, point them out, because chances are it'll save you money. Your driver won't be sitting in the yard 3 or 4 hours, wasting time on the clock, especially now with ELDs and all this, you're being tracked up the yin. So, you want to make sure your drivers are super efficient. Help each other out. And I think too, like, I know, like, a lot of times it's shipper meetings. Shippers will say to the carrier, do you got any suggestions on things we could do better? And what I encourage carriers to do is say, I'd like to just point something out to you. I'd like to just bring something to your attention. I think you and me could save money together if we did such and such. I think the shipper would find it very refreshing, and it would cement the relationship.
Oh, big time. I was going to say, add to that. I've known a couple of motor carriers where, the CEO or president of the company came up through the ranks as a driver and not afraid to get into a truck. I know we could probably come up with a whole bunch of guys that still do that. When you have a relationship with your customer and you've got an issue, jump in the truck, be a driver for the day, go over to that location, and all of a sudden you walk in and go, oh my God, okay. I could call the CEO of that shipper up and go, hey, Bob, how's it going? Don, how you doing? Great. Yeah. I was just overloading a load over at this warehouse, and wow, there's some inefficiencies going on. Can I help you?
You know what? Like that is so true. I won't mention the names here, but they're a name brand shipper and a name brand carrier. Yeah. And so what would happen is this carrier, they'd land a new piece of business. Nice piece of truckload business. It's steady, good revenue paying truckload business. So the CEO who came up through the ranks as a driver would go and pick up one of the first loads and tell the shipper all about it and go and meet with that shipper. And so he would cement the relationship with the shipper. He would himself become knowledgeable about what the shipper's operation, the dock operation, the number of doors available and so on. That was the smartest thing the guy ever did. I know you say, well, as a CEO of a trucking company, got time to get in a truck and go and pick up a load. Well, you know what? It was the smartest thing the guy ever did.
Yep. You make time.
Yeah. You make time.
And I think that's a great spot to bring this interview to a conclusion. Dan Goodwill of Dan Goodwill and Associates. Your contact info is in the show notes down below, so people who've watched this show can reach out to you, get some help. Last word to you, Dan. What didn't we say yet that you would like to get out there?
You know what? I think we could just repeat what we said earlier, which is it's all about relationships. I think if there's one theme to what we talked about in the last half hour, it's, as a carrier, focus on these relationships, build strong relationships at all levels in your organization.
Yeah.
And if you give good service backed up with a strong relationship, you're going to hold on to your accounts and you're going to have happy customers.
Well, and I'll tell you, the thing that I heard that I don't think enough carriers do is keep a scorecard of their performance with the shipper, and then on a regular basis, meet with that shipper and do a little bit of bragging. And I don't want to, it is bragging, but it displaying the truth on what a great job you are to cement that relationship.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And listen, it's been a pleasure. Pleasure talking with you fellows this morning, by the way. I've had a blast.
It's been awesome. Been awesome.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate your time.
You bet. My pleasure. All right, guys. Take care. Thanks very much.
That, of course, was Dan Goodwill from Dan Goodwill and Associates. What a great interview. Dan's got so many insights from his 40 plus years in the business that he is now available to you. All right. That was great. Thanks, Dan, so much. That's it for this week on the Trucking, Risk, and Insurance Podcast. See you next week.